The morning air felt crisp and promising as I settled into the plush back seat of Chloe's SUV. The Meadowbrook Drive residence, my home for decades, receded in the rearview mirror, but I barely noticed. My heart was light, filled with anticipation for the family reunion we were heading to. Chloe, my daughter-in-law, had been so insistent, so full of cheer, talking about catching up with everyone, seeing cousins I hadn't seen in years. Brenda, her mother, sat beside me, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. She'd been a bit quiet on the drive over, but I chalked it up to her usual reserved nature. "Are we sure we're taking the scenic route, Chloe?" I asked, adjusting my Eleanor's faded leather purse on my lap. The miles were already ticking by, and I hadn't seen any familiar landmarks. "Oh, absolutely, Eleanor," Chloe chirped, her voice a little too bright. "Brenda found this amazing shortcut. It'll be an adventure." Brenda just nodded, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. I leaned back, content to let them handle the navigation. I'd brought along a dog-eared road atlas, just in case, but I trusted them. This was supposed to be a lovely weekend, a chance to reconnect with family, maybe even see my son, David, more than usual. Life had been a bit distant lately, and I was eager for some warmth, some closeness. The sun glinted off the dashboard, and I hummed a little tune, completely oblivious to the storm gathering just over the horizon. The miles melted away, and I felt a sense of contentment, a familiar comfort in being with family, even if Brenda's silence was a little peculiar. The hum of the tires on the asphalt had been a lullaby, a comforting sound that matched the steady rhythm of my breathing. I'd been lost in pleasant thoughts, picturing the faces of nieces and nephews, the easy laughter of cousins I hadn't seen since the last big holiday gathering. Chloe's chatter had been a bright counterpoint, a bubbly stream of family gossip and plans for the weekend. Brenda, as always, was the quiet anchor beside her, her presence a familiar, if sometimes distant, comfort. Then, without any warning, the SUV lurched. It wasn't a smooth stop, more of a sudden jarring halt that sent a jolt through my body. My Eleanor's faded leather purse slid from my lap, its contents shifting inside. The engine sputtered, then died. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal. "What is it, Chloe?" I asked, my voice laced with a touch of confusion. We weren't anywhere near a town, just miles and miles of scrub brush and endless sky stretching out on either side of the highway. The sun, which had been so warm and inviting, now seemed to beat down with an almost hostile intensity. Chloe turned in her seat, her face a mask I couldn't quite read. It wasn't the bright, cheerful expression from moments before. There was something hard in her eyes, something that made a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. Brenda remained silent, her gaze fixed straight ahead, as if she hadn't noticed the abrupt stop or my questioning tone. "Well, Eleanor," Chloe began, her voice losing its earlier lilt, replaced by a flat, almost bored tone. "Brenda and I have decided this isn't going to work." I blinked, trying to process her words. "Not going to work? What are you talking about, dear?" "The family reunion." Brenda finally spoke, her voice low and devoid of emotion. "We're not going to the reunion, Eleanor. And you're not going anywhere with us." My brow furrowed. This had to be some kind of joke, a bizarre prank. Chloe was always one for dramatics. "Oh, you too," I chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "You're trying to scare me, aren't you? Very funny. Now let's get going, we're losing daylight." Chloe didn't laugh. She didn't even crack a smile. Instead, she reached over and unbuckled her seatbelt. Brenda did the same. "This is it, Eleanor," Chloe said, her voice chillingly calm. "This is where you get out." My breath hitched. "Get out? Chloe, what are you saying? Where are we?" I looked around frantically, trying to orient myself. The highway stretched out in both directions, a shimmering ribbon of heat and emptiness. There was nothing. No houses, no signs, just the vast, indifferent desert. "We're a long way from home, Eleanor," Brenda added, her voice like ice. "About 490 kilometers, give or take." 490 kilometers. The number hit me like a physical blow. My mind reeled. This wasn't a joke. This was real. But why? My voice was a mere whisper. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, blurring the harsh landscape outside. What did I do? Chloe opened her door, the hot air rushing in. It doesn't matter what you did, Eleanor. It's what we're doing. We're done with this. We're done with you. She looked at Brenda, a strange, triumphant glint in her eyes. Then they both looked at me. Their faces, usually so familiar, seemed alien, twisted into expressions of cruel amusement. Figure it out, mother-in-law. Chloe spat, a harsh laugh escaping her lips. Yeah, figure it out. Brenda echoed, her voice sharp and mocking. And then, with a speed that shocked me, they slammed their doors shut. The engine roared to life, a sudden, violent sound. The tires spun on the gravel shoulder, kicking up dust. I watched, frozen in disbelief, as the SUV lurched forward, accelerating rapidly. No. Wait. I cried, fumbling for the door handle, but it was too late. The vehicle sped away, a receding speck in the shimmering heat haze. They didn't look back. They didn't slow down. They just drove away, leaving me standing on the side of a deserted highway, utterly alone, the silence rushing back in, heavier and more terrifying than before. The sun beat down, relentless, and the vast emptiness of the landscape seemed to swallow me whole. I was stranded, abandoned, and the chilling laughter of my daughter-in-law and her mother echoed in the sudden, profound silence. I never returned home. The silence after the SUV disappeared was a physical thing, a heavy blanket smothering the already oppressive heat. I stood there, a statue carved from disbelief, the dust from their tires still settling around my sensible shoes. My Eleanor's faded leather purse felt like a lead weight in my hand. 490 kilometers. The number echoed in my head, a cruel joke that wasn't funny. My mind, usually so sharp, felt like a scrambled egg. What do you do when the people you trusted most, the people you loved, just leave you? My eyes scanned the endless stretch of highway. Nothing. Just heat waves dancing on the asphalt, mocking my predicament. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the edges of my composure. I was 72 years old, for heaven's sake. Not exactly equipped for a desert survival mission. I hugged my purse tighter, a pathetic shield against the vast emptiness. I needed help. But who? And how? Just as a sob threatened to escape, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Patrol car slowly making its way down the highway. Hope, a tiny, fragile thing, bloomed in my chest. I raised a trembling hand, waving it frantically. The car slowed, then stopped a few yards away. A window rolled down, revealing a uniformed officer. Officer Ramirez, his name tag read. He looked to be in his mid-40s, his face weathered, his eyes carrying a weariness that felt familiar. "Everything all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice calm, professional. I stumbled forward, my voice cracking. "No, officer. No, it's not. My daughter-in-law and her mother. They just left me. They just drove off." The words tumbled out, a messy confession of betrayal. He listened patiently, his expression unreadable. He didn't seem surprised, which somehow made it worse. "Left you here." I nodded, tears finally spilling over, hot tracks on my dusty cheeks. "Yes," I said. "They said they were done with me. They drove away. I don't know where I am." Officer Ramirez sighed, a soft, almost imperceptible sound. He reached for his radio. "Can you tell me your name, ma'am?" "Eleanor. Eleanor Vance." He spoke into the radio, relaying my name and situation. His tone was neutral, devoid of judgment, but I could feel the unspoken questions hanging in the air. Why was a woman my age out here alone? What was the story? After a few minutes, he turned back to me. "Okay, Eleanor. They've put out a general alert. But honestly, ma'am, this is pretty far out. It'll take some time for anyone to get here if they even can." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the desolate landscape. "You're a long way from anywhere. Best advice I can give you. Try to find some shade. Conserve your energy. And if you see anyone else, be careful. This isn't the safest place to be stranded. He didn't offer me a ride. He didn't offer me water. He just offered a stark warning, a dose of reality that felt like another blow. His minimal assistance was, in its own way, as cold as Chloe and Brenda's departure. He was just doing his job, I supposed, but it felt like another door slamming shut. He drove off, leaving me once again in the suffocating silence, the officer's words ringing in my ears. The sun beat down, relentless, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was truly on my own. I had to figure this out. I had to survive. The officer's words hung in the air, heavy and cold. You're a long way from anywhere. He'd driven off, leaving me with the relentless sun and a silence that screamed louder than any engine. My Eleanor's faded leather purse felt even heavier now, a useless anchor. I had to move, had to find some kind of shelter. Looking down the highway in the direction they'd gone was pointless. They were long gone. My eyes scanned the other way, and there, shimmering in the heat haze, was a sign. Faded, peeling paint but legible. Starlight Motel. It wasn't exactly the Ritz, but it was a building, a place with a roof. It was my only option. Walking towards it felt like wading through thick honey. Each step was an effort, my 72-year-old legs protesting with every movement. The heat was a physical force, pressing down on me, stealing my breath. The motel, when I finally reached it, was even more run down up close. A single-story building, painted a sickly pale yellow, with a neon sign that flickered erratically, missing a few letters. Starlight MOL. It looked like it had seen better days, maybe back when Elvis was still on the radio. But there was a desk, a sliver of hope in the vast emptiness. I pushed open the door, a bell above it jingling weakly. The air inside was thick with the smell of stale cigarettes and cheap disinfectant. A woman with tired eyes and hair pulled back in a severe bun sat behind a counter cluttered with paperwork. She looked up, her expression one of mild annoyance, as if my arrival was an inconvenience. "Need a room," I managed, my voice raspy from the heat and disuse. She eyed me, taking in my disheveled state, my dusty clothes. "Just one?" she asked, her tone flat. "Yes, just one." I fumbled in my purse, my hands shaking, pulling out the few bills I had left. It wasn't much, but I hoped it would be enough. The officer had mentioned a general alert, but what good was that out here? Nobody was coming for me anytime soon. She counted the money slowly, her gaze flicking up at me occasionally. "That'll be for one night. Non-smoking, second door on the left." She pushed a key across the counter. It was a heavy, old-fashioned metal key. I took it, mumbling a thank you, and turned to leave. The weight of it all was starting to sink in. Chloe and Brenda had just left me. Like I was a piece of trash they'd found on the side of the road. The sheer audacity of it, the coldness, was almost unbelievable. I'd always thought of myself as a good mother-in-law, always trying to be helpful, to be kind. What had I done to deserve this? Back in my room, the door clicked shut behind me, sealing me in with my despair. It was small, sparse. A bed with a faded floral comforter, a dresser, a small TV bolted to the wall, and a bathroom that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Eisenhower administration. But it was a sanctuary. A place to escape the brutal sun and the crushing realization of my situation. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the springs groaning in protest. My Eleanor's faded leather purse lay beside me. I opened it, looking at the few personal items inside. A small, dog-eared road atlas, a stack of old family photographs, a well-worn Bible. These were the remnants of my life, the life that had been so carelessly snatched away. The distance from home, that number, 490 kilometers, felt like an insurmountable chasm. It wasn't just miles. It was a lifetime away from everything I knew. I closed my eyes, trying to push back the tears, but they came anyway, hot and heavy. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a prank. This was real. I was alone, stranded in a place I'd never heard of, with no one to turn to. The memory of Chloe's cruel laughter, Brenda's chillingly calm voice, played over and over in my head. They'd wanted me to suffer. And right now I was. The Starlight Motel, with its flickering sign and stale air, was my new reality. And the long, hard road ahead stretched out before me, as vast and unforgiving as the desert outside. The sun had moved across the sky, a slow, agonizing crawl. My throat felt like sandpaper, and the gnawing in my stomach was a constant, unpleasant reminder of my situation. I'd spent what felt like an eternity in that dingy room at the Starlight Motel, the silence broken only by the occasional rumble of a passing truck on the highway. My Eleanor's faded leather purse sat on the worn dresser, a heavy reminder of my depleted resources. I'd counted the bills again, a pathetic stack that wouldn't get me far. Desperation was a bitter taste in my mouth, but something else was starting to stir within me, a flicker of defiance. I couldn't just sit here and waste away. I needed to do something, anything. I pulled out the dog-eared road atlas from my purse. The map was a blur of unfamiliar towns and endless stretches of highway. The number, 490 kilometers, seemed to mock me from the page. Felt like a million miles. I needed food, and more importantly I needed information. A place where people talked, where I could maybe pick up a clue, a hint of where I was, or even just a friendly face. Stepping back out into the oppressive heat felt like walking into an oven. The Starlight Motel was a ghost of a place, and I knew I couldn't stay there much longer. Following the dusty road a little way, I spotted a sign, barely visible through the heat haze. The Cozy Corner Cafe. It wasn't much, just a small single-story building with a faded awning, but the promise of a meal of human contact was enough. As I got closer, I could hear the low hum of conversation, the clinking of dishes. Sounded like a real place, a place where people lived their lives. Pushing open the door, a small bell above it jingled. The air inside was a welcome relief, cool and filled with a comforting aroma of coffee and frying bacon. It was a typical diner, with red vinyl booths and a long counter. A few locals were scattered around, nursing coffee cups and chatting. Behind the counter, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile was wiping down the surface. She looked to be around my age, maybe a bit younger, with a friendly, no-nonsense air about her. "Well, hello there," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Haven't seen you around here before. Come on in, grab a seat anywhere." I managed a weak smile, my voice still a little rough. "Thank you. I could use some coffee." She nodded, her gaze taking in my disheveled appearance without judgment. "You look like you've had a long day, honey. Coffee's on the house. And maybe you'd like something to eat. We've got a special today. Meatloaf with mashed potatoes." Tears pricked at my eyes. It was such a simple offer, but it felt like a lifeline. "That sounds wonderful," I choked out. "Thank you so much." I slid into a booth near the window, the worn vinyl surprisingly comfortable. The woman, who introduced herself as Sarah Jenkins, brought me a steaming mug of coffee. It was the best coffee I'd ever tasted. As I sipped it, the warmth spread through me, chasing away some of the chill of fear and despair. Sarah brought over a plate piled high with the most delicious-looking meatloaf, gravy, and fluffy mashed potatoes. "Eat up," she said, placing the plate in front of me. "You need your strength." I started to eat, slowly at first, then with more urgency. It was the first real food I'd had in what felt like days. Sarah sat down across from me, her expression one of genuine concern. She didn't pry, didn't ask too many questions, but her presence was a comfort. "You look like you've been through the ringer," she said gently, after a long, comfortable silence. "Anything you want to talk about?" And then the dam broke. The words, the confusion, the sheer terror of being abandoned, poured out of me. I told her about Chloe and Brenda, about the car ride, about being left on the side of the road. I told her about the Starlight Motel and my dwindling funds. Sarah listened patiently, her hand occasionally resting on mine, a silent gesture of support. She didn't offer easy answers, but she offered something just as valuable, a sympathetic ear and a shared moment of humanity in this desolate place. For the first time since that horrifying afternoon, A tiny seed of hope began to sprout within me. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't entirely alone. The coffee Sarah poured was hot, strong, and tasted like hope. Sitting in that booth at the Cozy Corner Cafe, with the comforting smell of bacon and the low hum of local chatter around me, something shifted. For the first time since that nightmare on the highway, I wasn't just a victim. Sarah's gentle questions, her quiet strength, it was like a balm on a raw wound. She didn't judge, didn't push, just listened. And as I poured out the whole sorry story, the sheer injustice of it all, a different kind of fire started to burn inside me. Not the panic of being stranded, but a steady, determined flame. They thought they'd broken me, left me for dead on the side of the road. Chloe and Brenda, with their cruel laughter and that chilling finality. My own son, David, somewhere out there, probably oblivious or worse, complicit. The thought of them, of their casual disregard for my life, it was enough to make my blood boil. But Sarah's kindness, it reminded me that not everyone was like them. There was good in the world, even in a dusty little town like this, miles from anywhere I knew. I looked down at my Eleanor's faded leather purse, still clutched in my lap. Inside, the dog-eared road atlas felt less like a symbol of my helplessness and more like a tool. 490 kilometers. It was a long way, sure, but it wasn't an impossible distance. Not if I was smart. Not if I was careful. Not if I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started thinking. "You need a plan, Eleanor," Sarah said softly, as if reading my mind. She'd brought me a slice of her famous meatloaf, and I devoured it like a starving woman, which I suppose I was. "Sitting here, waiting for someone to rescue you. That's not gonna work out here." She was right. I couldn't just fade away in this forgotten corner of the country. My life, my reputation, my dignity, they'd tried to steal it all. But they hadn't succeeded. Not completely. The betrayal was a deep wound, but it was also a catalyst. My initial shock and fear were giving way to a steely resolve. I wasn't going to be a ghost, forgotten and left behind. I was Eleanor Vance, and I had a life, a family, and a whole lot of people who deserved to know the truth about what Chloe and Brenda had done. I needed to be smart. I needed to be strategic. This wasn't just about getting home anymore. It was about making them pay. It was about showing them that you don't mess with an old woman who still has fight left in her. I thanked Sarah, my voice stronger now, more purposeful. As I stepped back out into the harsh sunlight, the Starlight Motel seemed like a distant bad dream. The road ahead, though uncertain, felt different. Felt like mine. I had a new purpose, and it was a purpose forged in betrayal, fueled by a quiet rage, and sharpened by the unexpected kindness of a stranger. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. The next few days were a blur of early mornings and late evenings. Sarah at the Cozy Corner Cafe was a godsend. She let me help out with washing dishes, wiping down tables, anything that kept my hands busy and my mind from spiraling. The pay was peanuts, barely enough for a cup of coffee and a slice of toast, but it was something. It was a start. I needed more, though. I needed to get my bearings, figure out where exactly I was, and start piecing together how I was going to get back, or at least, how I was going to make Chloe and Brenda pay for this. I remembered seeing a sign for a public library on the edge of town when Sarah drove me back to the Starlight Motel after my first day working. The next morning, after a quick, cold shower, I walked. It was a good hour's walk, but the crisp morning air, even with the underlying dust, felt good. It was better than being cooped up in that dingy room. The downtown public library was a small, unassuming brick building, the kind that probably hadn't seen a major renovation since the Eisenhower administration. But inside it was a different story. It was quiet, orderly, and blessedly cool. The smell of old paper and lemon polish filled the air. A friendly librarian, a woman with kind eyes and a bun that looked like it could hold a small bird's nest, pointed me towards the computers. I spent hours there day after day. Sarah would give me a packed lunch and I'd head straight to the library. I'd start with local newspapers, old ones if I could find them, looking for any mention of a town the next size up, or any news that might give me a clue about the area. I learned that I was in a county called Oakhaven, in a state I'd only ever driven through. The distance to anything familiar felt immense, But now, with a map and a bit of research, it felt less like an insurmountable wall and more like a challenge. I also took on other odd jobs. Mrs. Gable down the street needed her garden weeded, and Mr. Henderson from the hardware store asked me to help sort inventory in his dusty back room. Each dollar earned was a small victory, a tiny step away from the helplessness I'd felt on that highway. It wasn't glamorous, not by a long shot. My hands were rough, my back ached, and I was constantly tired. But with every task I completed, with every piece of information I found in those library archives, a little bit of the old Eleanor started to resurface. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was being drowned out by a growing sense of purpose. I was no longer just a victim. I was a strategist. I was a survivor. And I was gathering my resources, one dusty newspaper and one back-breaking chore at a time. I needed to know more about David and Chloe, about their lives. The library was my battlefield, and knowledge was my weapon. The money I'd scraped together from weeding gardens and sorting dusty hardware store shelves wasn't much, but it was enough. Sarah, bless her heart, knew a guy who ran a little electronics shop on the other side of town. He had a used laptop, nothing fancy, a bit scratched up, probably seen better days, but it powered on. For $50 it was mine. $50 that felt like a king's ransom. Carrying that small, portable laptop back to my room at the Starlight Motel felt like carrying a secret weapon. The motel room, with its faded floral wallpaper and the persistent smell of stale cigarette smoke, suddenly seemed less like a prison and more like a command center. I plugged it in, the whirring of the fan a welcome sound. The screen flickered to life, a pale blue glow in the dim room. This was it. My chance to find them. To figure out what was really going on. My hands, still rough from manual labor, trembled a little as I navigated the basic setup. It was all so new, this internet thing. I'd always relied on my Rolodex, my address book, actual phone calls. But here, in this forgotten town with no one to call, this was my only shot. I started with the basics, typing in David's name, then Chloe's. Nothing. Just a bunch of random results, people with the same names in different states. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack the size of the country. Frustration started to bubble up, that familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. I took a deep breath, remembering Sarah's advice. Patience, Eleanor. Good things come to those who wait and work for it. So, I worked. I started digging deeper, using search terms that were more specific. I remembered Chloe mentioning a business venture, something about online marketing. I tried that. Then I tried combinations of their names with keywords like business, investment, legal issues. It felt like I was casting a wide net, hoping to snag something, anything. Hours blurred into one another. The cheap motel lamp cast long shadows across the room. My eyes burned, and my back ached from sitting hunched over. But then a hit. A small business listing for a company called Sterling Solutions, with Chloe's name listed as CEO. My heart leaped. This was it. This was real. I clicked on the link, my breath catching in my throat. The website was slick, professional, full of buzzwords about synergy and disruptive innovation. It looked like everything they wanted the world to see. But I knew better. I knew what was behind the polished facade. I scrolled down, looking for any contact information, any hint of their current life. And there was a small news article from a few months back, a local business journal piece about successful entrepreneurs in the area. It mentioned Chloe and David, their rapid growth, and a photo. Seeing David's face, looking older, more worn than I remembered, sent a pang through me. And Chloe, her smile as sharp and calculating as ever. The article didn't give me everything I needed, not by a long shot. But it confirmed they were still together, still building this empire on. What? I needed more. I needed to know the details, the cracks in their perfect picture. This laptop, this digital window, was my first real weapon. The game was truly on. The laptop screen, that pale blue glow in the dim motel room, became my world. I'd spent hours, days really, digging through the digital dirt. It wasn't just one article, not one mention. It was a whole mess of them, buried deep in the internet's underbelly. Sterling Solutions looked all shiny and successful on the surface, but when you started pulling at the threads, the whole thing started to unravel. I found a local news site from Chloe and David's hometown, the one that wasn't so far from the Sterling family estate. They had a whole series on business busts and fading fortunes. One headline screamed, "Sterling Solutions under fire. Investors cry foul." Bingo! It talked about shady investment practices, about money disappearing faster than a free donut at the Cozy Corner Cafe. It mentioned lawsuits, disgruntled employees, and a whole lot of legal trouble brewing behind closed doors. Then I stumbled onto social media. Not Chloe's polished, perfect life feed, but the grittier, more honest stuff. Private forums, complaint boards, even a few anonymous blog posts. People were talking. They were furious. One post, from someone claiming to be a former employee, detailed how Chloe would scream at David in front of everyone, how he'd just stand there, looking like a kicked puppy. Another mentioned a huge fight at a company party, something about David being caught with his hand in the cookie jar, and Chloe having to cover it up. It painted a picture of a marriage that was less power couple, and more house on fire. I saw pictures too. Not the posed, smiling shots they probably fed to the press. These were candid, blurry phone pics. Chloe looking absolutely furious, her face contorted with rage, yelling at David across a crowded room. David looking defeated, shoulders slumped, his eyes empty. In one, taken at what looked like a fancy restaurant, they were both at the table, but there was this huge space between them like they were on different planets. It wasn't just a rough patch. It was a full-blown war zone. Made my stomach churn. This wasn't just about them leaving me stranded. This was about the whole rotten foundation they'd built their lives on. They were living a lie, a big, flashy, expensive lie, and it was cracking under the pressure. Seeing it all laid out, piece by painful piece, was almost as bad as being left on that highway. It confirmed everything I'd suspected, but it also showed me a depth of misery I hadn't quite grasped. David, my son, trapped in a life with a woman who seemed to thrive on his misery. It was a different kind of abandonment, a slow, agonizing one. This digital trail, this messy, unfiltered truth, was exactly what I needed. It was the confirmation, the evidence. The game was definitely on, and I finally had my playbook. The days at the Starlight Motel were starting to blend together, a gray blur of cheap coffee and endless internet searches. That little laptop, my lifeline, was humming away on the chipped Formica desk. Sarah had mentioned the community center downtown had free Wi-Fi, a place where folks could get online without paying an arm and a leg. It seemed like a good idea, a change of scenery, and maybe a chance to catch Chloe off guard if she was still in this neck of the woods. So, one afternoon I packed up my laptop and headed over. The community center was a modest building, smelling faintly of disinfectant and old paper. There were a few people scattered around, mostly older folks reading newspapers or younger kids tapping away on their own devices. I found a quiet corner table, plugged in, and got to work. It was slow going, trying to piece together the puzzle of Sterling Solutions and the mess it seemed to be. That night, I was still at the center, the only one left besides the sleepy attendant nodding off behind the counter. The place was quiet, almost too quiet. I was scrolling through some obscure business forum, trying to find anything about David's involvement when I heard it. Faint at first, then clearer. Voices, coming from the small conference room just off the main area. The door was ajar, and the sound carried. 'Twas Chloe. Her voice, usually so smooth and practiced, was ragged, laced with a panic I'd never heard before. She was on the phone, pacing. "No, you can't do this to me." "Not now," she hissed. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't want to eavesdrop, not really, but I couldn't move. It was like watching a car wreck you knew was coming. Then I heard another voice, male, sharp and angry. "You promised me, Chloe. You guaranteed this would be a clean exit." Chloe's voice cracked. "David, please. We need to figure this out. They're talking about fraud. Actual fraud. David. My David." His name, spoken with such desperation, sent a chill down my spine. He sounded weak, pathetic, just like the online posts had hinted. Fraud. You think the one who messed up. You were the one pushing this whole Sterling Solutions garbage. David shot back, his voice rising. And now Brenda's gone silent. Just like that. Brenda. Course. She was always the puppet master. Chloe was sobbing now, a raw, ugly sound. She said she had it handled. She said the investors were managed. I don't know what to do, David. We're going to lose everything. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. This was it. The messy, ugly truth behind their perfect facade. It wasn't just about leaving me stranded. It was about a whole web of lies, and it was all coming undone. Chloe wasn't the confident schemer I'd seen in the photos. She was scared, terrified. And David, my son, he was drowning right alongside her. The shared Wi-Fi, the open door. It felt like the universe was handing me the pieces of their downfall. I just had to put them together. The overheard conversation at the community center was like a lightning strike, illuminating the dark corners of my son's life. Chloe and David, my David, were in deep trouble. Real trouble. Fraud. Brenda, my supposed confidant, was apparently the puppet master pulling the strings, and now the strings were snapping. My initial shock gave way to a cold, hard clarity. They hadn't just left me on the side of the road. They'd built their whole lives on a foundation of lies and deceit, and the whole thing was about to come crashing down. For days, I'd been holed up in my cheap motel room, the stale air thick with my own desperation. But now something had shifted. The fear was still there, a knot in my gut, but it was being overshadowed by a fierce, protective anger. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about David, my son, trapped in a gilded cage with a woman who was unraveling before my very ears. He was weak, yes, and he'd made terrible choices, but he was still my boy. And Brenda, that viper, had played us all. I knew I couldn't just sit there and wait for the whole thing to explode. I had to be the one to detonate the bomb. The information I'd gathered, the overheard conversation, the online whispers. It was all ammunition. I needed a plan, a solid, undeniable plan that would expose them for the frauds they were. My first stop was back at the Cozy Corner Cafe. Sarah was wiping down tables, her usual warm smile in place. "Eleanor, dear, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. I managed a weak smile. "Something like that, Sarah. But maybe a ghost I can finally put to rest." I sat down at my usual booth, the one that felt like a small piece of home. I ordered coffee, black, and pulled out my small portable laptop. The screen glowed, a familiar comfort in this unfamiliar world. I spent the next few days at the downtown public library. It was quiet, orderly, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling in my mind. I spread out printouts from the internet, scribbled notes in a cheap notebook, and pieced together the timeline of Sterling Solutions' downfall. I cross-referenced dates, names, and financial reports. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture of calculated deception. Brenda Sterling, the mastermind. Chloe, the eager accomplice. And David, the unwitting pawn, or perhaps a willing one, caught in their web. I needed proof, undeniable proof. I remembered Chloe's social media, the carefully curated images of a perfect life. But I also remembered the grittier, private forums, the anonymous complaints. I started digging deeper, looking for anything that could corroborate the overheard conversation. I found a few more disgruntled ex-employees who'd been silenced with NDAs. Their stories mirrored what I'd heard, tales of pressure, of fudged numbers, of investors left holding empty bags. Then I found it. A buried press release, buried deep on a financial news site, about a major investor lawsuit against Sterling Solutions. It detailed accusations of wire fraud and money laundering. The dates matched perfectly with the period David had been so distant, so stressed. It was all there, laid out in black and white. Brenda's name was all over it, linked to shell corporations and offshore accounts. I also started drafting a letter. Not to the police, not yet. That felt too final. This needed to be more personal, more devastating. I wrote to David first. I didn't accuse, not directly. I just laid out the facts, the things I'd learned. I wrote about his mother, about Brenda's manipulative nature, about how I'd been abandoned. I spoke of his marriage, of the fear I'd heard in Chloe's voice, the desperation in his. I asked him, "David, what have you done?" Then I drafted a separate, much harsher letter to Chloe and Brenda. This one was direct. I detailed their scheme, the fraud, the abandonment. I attached printouts of the most damning evidence, the lawsuit, the financial reports. I made it clear I knew everything. I wasn't asking for anything. I was telling them they were exposed. The final piece of the puzzle was how to deliver it. I couldn't just mail it, they might destroy it. I needed a confrontation, but on my terms. I needed them to see me, to know that I wasn't broken, that I was coming for them. I thought about the Sterling family estate, their symbol of success. It was time to bring the mess right to their doorstep. I needed to make them face the wreckage they'd created. This was my calculated move. The game was far from over, but now I was playing to win. The planning had taken days, each step carefully considered, each word chosen with precision. I'd made my calls, planting the seeds of my strategy. Now it was time to set the trap. I knew Chloe and Brenda wouldn't come to me. They saw me as a problem to be discarded, not someone to be reasoned with. So I had to lure them out, into a space where I could finally confront them, where the carefully constructed lies they'd built their lives upon would crumble. I decided on a neutral ground, a place that held no sentimental value for any of us, but was familiar enough to Chloe and Brenda that they wouldn't suspect a thing. The Sterling family estate was too much their territory, too imposing. The cozy corner cafe, while welcoming, was too public for the kind of conversation I needed to have. The downtown public library was my research hub, but not a place for a showdown. I needed somewhere they'd feel comfortable, somewhere they'd let their guard down. I settled on a small, upscale restaurant on the other side of town, a place Chloe had mentioned once, a place she liked to go for power lunches. I called Chloe using a burner phone, my voice carefully modulated to sound casual, almost hesitant. "Chloe, honey, it's Eleanor," I began, trying to inject a note of vulnerability into my tone. I was hoping we could talk. Just you and me. Maybe over lunch. I've been doing a lot of thinking and I just want to understand. I let a beat of silence hang in the air, letting her imagine my supposed broken state. She was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Was she suspicious? Or was she already seeing an opportunity to twist the knife further? "Lunch, Grandma," she finally said, the word dripping with a saccharine sweetness that made my stomach churn. "I don't know, Eleanor. Mom and I are really busy." "Oh, I understand," I said, my voice wavering just enough. "It's just, I miss David. And I thought maybe if we could talk we could all move past this. I've even got a little something for you. A peace offering, you could say." I didn't mention Brenda, letting Chloe believe this was a private reconciliation attempt. It was a calculated risk, but I knew Chloe's vanity, her need to be seen as the one in control, the one who could mend things. "A peace offering," Chloe repeated, a hint of curiosity now in her voice. "What kind of peace offering?" "Just something small," I lied. "Something I thought you'd appreciate. I'll have it with me. Just say the word, and I'll book a table. My treat, of course." I let her think she was being generous by even considering it. After a tense pause, she relented. "Fine, Eleanor. Tomorrow noon. The Willow Creek Bistro. But this is it. No more drama." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me with a sense of grim satisfaction. She'd taken the bait. The next day, I arrived at the Willow Creek Bistro early. The place was elegant, hushed, with soft lighting and attentive staff. I chose a table in a quiet corner, with a clear view of the entrance. On the table I placed my small portable laptop, its screen turned off, and beside it, a single unopened envelope. This was it. The culmination of everything. The carefully gathered evidence, the letters I'd drafted, all ready to be presented. I wasn't going there to beg or to plead. I was going there to deliver the truth, the unvarnished, ugly truth. I adjusted the tarnished silver locket around my neck, a small comfort, a reminder of who I was before they tried to break me. I took a deep breath, ready for whatever came next. The waiting was the hardest part, the silence amplifying the thrumming in my veins. I watched the door, my gaze steady, my resolve firm. They were coming, and I was ready. The heavy glass door of the Willow Creek Bistro swung open, admitting Chloe and Brenda. Chloe, ever the peacock, wore a sharp pantsuit, her eyes scanning the room with a practiced, almost predatory gaze. Brenda, trailing slightly behind, was dressed in a crisp, neutral blazer, her expression a carefully blank mask. They spotted me immediately, their faces tightening just a fraction. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. They approached the table, Chloe leading the way. "Grandma," she said, her voice overly sweet, a stark contrast to the cool appraisal in her eyes. "You made it." Brenda offered a tight-lipped smile. "Eleanor, I hope you're feeling better." I gestured to the empty chair beside me. "Please sit. I've ordered us some water." I kept my voice steady, betraying none of the storm raging inside. The small, portable laptop sat on the table between us, closed. Beside it, the unopened envelope. My hands rested calmly in my lap, though my heart was doing a frantic drum solo against my ribs. Chloe sat down, crossing her legs, her expensive heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Brenda took the seat opposite me, her posture rigid. The air crackled with unspoken tension. For a few moments we just sat there, the clinking of silverware and hushed conversations from other tables the only sounds. "So," Chloe began, her tone impatient, "you wanted to talk. About what, exactly?" I met her gaze directly, then shifted to Brenda. "I wanted to talk about David. About what you both did." My voice was low, but it carried a weight I hadn't possessed just weeks ago. I reached for the laptop, opening it with a soft click. The screen glowed to life, displaying a folder labeled Sterling Solutions, The Truth. Brenda's eyes narrowed. "Eleanor, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is highly inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" I echoed, a humorless smile touching my lips. "What's inappropriate is abandoning your husband's mother on the side of the road, miles from anywhere. What's inappropriate is building a life on lies." I turned the laptop so they could see the screen. "I've been doing some digging, you see. Thanks to a little eavesdropping at the community center, I got a hint of what was going on." Chloe leaned forward, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about Sterling Solutions," I said, my voice gaining strength. "Or rather, what it really was. Shell. A way to funnel money to defraud investors. Brenda, you were the mastermind, weren't you? And Chloe, you were right there with her." I clicked on a document, a cached news article detailing a massive investor lawsuit against Sterling Solutions for wire fraud and money laundering. This lawsuit, filed 2 years ago. It matches the timeline perfectly, doesn't it? The same time David was so stressed, so distant. The same time you both disappeared from my life. Brenda's face paled, but she managed to keep her composure. "This is ridiculous. Eleanor, you're clearly confused." "Am I?" I opened another file, a compilation of anonymized online complaints from former employees, detailing the pressure, the doctored reports, the outright intimidation. These stories, they all paint the same picture. A picture of a company built on quicksand. And David, he was in the middle of it all. Was he a willing participant, Brenda? Or just a pawn in your game? Chloe scoffed. "David is a grown man. He made his own choices." "Did he?" I countered, my gaze locking onto Chloe. "Or did you and your mother manipulate him, just like you manipulated everyone else?" "I know about the pressure you put on him, Chloe. I heard your calls. The desperation. Life with him is hell, isn't it? He treats you like trash because of what you did to me, but you're still stuck, aren't you? Still playing the part." I pushed the unopened envelope across the table. "And this," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, "is for both of you. Contains everything. The lawsuit, the employee complaints, the details of the shell corporations. It's all there. There's nowhere left to hide. Brenda's hand shot out, her fingers splayed, as if to stop the inevitable. Chloe stared at the envelope, then at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fury and dawning horror. The carefully constructed facade of their lives was beginning to crack, and I was the one holding the hammer. The silence that followed was deafening, filled only by the sound of my own steady breathing. The reckoning had begun. The silence in the restaurant was thick, heavy with the weight of what I'd just laid bare. Chloe's face, usually so composed, was a mask of pure shock, her mouth slightly ajar. Brenda, ever the pragmatist, looked like she'd just been punched in the gut. Her carefully constructed composure had shattered, revealing the fear beneath. This is insane, Eleanor," Chloe stammered, her voice a little shaky. She reached for the envelope, her fingers trembling as she fumbled with the flap. She pulled out a few pages, her eyes scanning them rapidly. The color drained from her face with each word. Wire fraud. Money laundering. This isn't true. Brenda snatched the envelope from Chloe's hand, her own hand shaking now. She too began to read, her sharp features contorting with disbelief and then a dawning horror. The news article, the employee complaints. It was all there, laid out in stark, undeniable detail. "Where did you get this?" Brenda demanded, her voice raspy. She glared at me, her eyes burning with a mixture of fury and desperation. "How could you do this? How could do this?" I countered, my voice calm but firm. I'd spent too many nights in that lonely motel, too many days piecing this together, to be intimidated now. You both built your lives on a foundation of lies and deceit. You hurt David. You hurt me. And now, everyone's going to know the truth. Chloe let out a choked sob. "David. He's going to be so angry. He'll never forgive us." "He's already living a hell," I said, my gaze softening slightly as I thought of my son. "He's caught in the middle of your mess. He treats you like trash, Chloe, because he knows what you did to me, and he's drowning in guilt. He's drowning in the consequences of your actions, and he's too weak to swim out of it." Brenda slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "This is not over, Eleanor. You think you've won. You're just an old woman. You have nothing." "I have my dignity back," I replied, my voice resonating with a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. "And I have the truth. That's more than you can say. You've got your fancy estate, your fabricated success, but it's all going to come crashing down. The lawsuits, the investigations, they'll come. And when they do, you'll have nothing left." Chloe looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Please, Grandma. We can fix this. We can give you money. Anything you want. Just don't do this." I shook my head slowly. "It's not about money anymore, Chloe. It's about what's right. You abandoned me. You treated me like I was nothing. And for that, there has to be a reckoning." Just then, the restaurant manager, a polite man with a concerned expression, approached our table. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his eyes flicking between our tense faces and the scattered papers. Brenda quickly gathered the documents, shoving them back into the envelope. "Everything is fine," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just a family discussion." The manager nodded, but his gaze lingered for a moment before he moved on. The moment of interruption, however, had broken the spell. Chloe and Brenda exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them. The fear was palpable now, the bravado gone. "We need to go," Brenda said, her voice tight. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Chloe followed, her movements jerky and uncertain. "You can't hide from this," I called after them, my voice carrying across the hushed dining room. "The truth always comes out." They didn't look back. They practically fled the restaurant, leaving me alone at the table with the lingering scent of their desperation and the quiet hum of my own vindication. I watched them go, a sense of profound peace settling over me. The weight I'd carried for so long had finally lifted. It was time for David to face his own part in all of this, to finally confront the mess his wife and mother had created. My revenge wasn't about destruction, but about revelation. And the truth, as it always does, would set us all free, one way or another. The carefully constructed world of sterling solutions, and the lies that propped it up, was about to crumble. The silence in the restaurant after Chloe and Brenda bolted felt different. It wasn't the heavy, tense quiet of before, but a clean, almost crisp stillness. It was the sound of a storm passing, leaving behind a washed clean sky. I sat there for a long moment, the scattered papers on the table, the lawsuit, the employee complaints, the corporate shell details, a testament to the chaos I'd just unleashed. My hands, which had been clasped so tightly in my lap, relaxed. The frantic drum solo in my chest had finally subsided, replaced by a steady, rhythmic beat. Walking out of the Willow Creek Bistro, the afternoon sun felt warmer than it had in a long time. It wasn't just the sun, though. It was the feeling of the weight I'd been carrying for years, the crushing burden of betrayal and helplessness, finally lifting. I didn't hail a cab. Instead, I started walking, just putting one foot in front of the other. The familiar streets of my old neighborhood, the ones I'd been driven away from, looked different now. They weren't just a reminder of what was lost, but a path forward. I found myself drawn to the small park near my old house, the one with the big oak tree where David used to play as a boy. I sat on a bench, the worn wood familiar beneath my hands. I pulled out the tarnished silver locket from my pocket, a habit I'd fallen into during those lonely months. It was a simple thing, but it held a universe of memories. Looking at the faded pictures inside, I didn't feel the sting of regret or the ache of loss as acutely as I used to. Instead, there was a quiet acceptance. My life had been irrevocably changed, shattered into a million pieces by the cruelty of those two women. But in picking up those pieces, I hadn't just rebuilt what was there before. I'd forged something new, something stronger. The experience had stripped away the illusions, the polite pretenses, and revealed a core of resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I was no longer just Eleanor Vance, the grieving mother and grandmother. I was Eleanor, the woman who had faced down her tormentors and reclaimed her truth. The calls Chloe had made, the desperation in her voice, had been a stark reminder of the mess David was still trapped in. He was living a hell, just as I'd told her, a consequence of his own weakness and his wife's ruthless ambition. I knew he wouldn't forgive me easily, maybe never. But he needed to see the truth, to understand the foundation of lies his marriage was built upon. My actions weren't about punishing him, but about forcing a reckoning, about giving him a chance to finally confront the rot. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the park, I felt a profound sense of peace. The anger, the bitterness, had been a necessary fuel, but now it was spent. What remained was a quiet determination, a sense of purpose. I had my dignity back. I had my story. And I had the freedom that came with knowing I had done what was right, no matter the cost. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time in a long time it felt like mine. It was a new dawn, and I was ready to greet it, not as a victim, but as Eleanor, whole and unbowed. The world Brenda and Chloe had tried to build on deceit was already starting to crumble, and I was ready to build my own life, brick by quiet, honest brick. That's it. If you liked this video, share it with your friends and leave your like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss more videos like this. Leave your comments saying what you thought of the video and what you would like to see in the next videos. Remembering that we have other videos in this style that you will like to watch, just enter our channel that I guarantee you will like. Until the next video.